Hi, you're on the Reddit Confessions channel. If you've ever watched someone set fire to your dignity with a smile on their face, welcome. You're not alone. It happened at the Bistro Garnet, one of those places where even the air feels expensive. Crystal glasses, ambient jazz, everyone pretending they're not staring at each other's lives. We were there for a celebration, though I hadn't done anything worth celebrating. She told me to wear the navy jacket, so I did. Told me not to talk too much, so I didn't. Said she had something planned, something unforgettable. And she was right. Dinner moved like a script I hadn't read. People clinked glasses. Names I barely knew called her inspiring and fearless. I just smiled and nodded like background furniture. Until dessert. That's when she stood up and tapped her spoon on the side of her glass. What came next still makes my stomach twist. I want to share something deeply personal tonight, she said, placing her hand gently, not on mine, but on the shoulder of the man beside her. I've spent the last year torn between familiarity and freedom, between safety and the chance to finally feel alive. There were murmurs. I felt all the blood drain from my face. She didn't look at me. Not yet. Tonight, she continued. I've made my decision. I asked Clifton to be here not as my partner, but as a witness. That's when she turned, right to me, and with a smile as soft as a lullaby, she said, "You can speak if you want, or you can leave quietly. Either way, this is happening." Every person at that table froze. No one moved. No one breathed. And me? I stood up, straightened my napkin, left my untouched glass of wine right where it was, and I walked out. No words, no goodbye, just silence. She gave me a choice in front of everyone, so I gave her mine. They say silence speaks louder than words, but I never believed that until I felt mine echo through a room full of polished people who suddenly forgot how to blink. As I walked away from the table, I didn't look back. Not because I wasn't tempted to, trust me, I was, but because I knew that if I turned around, even for a second, she'd win. And she didn't deserve that. The valet didn't even ask for my ticket. He just looked at me, nodded like he already knew, and jogged off to fetch my car. I waited under those ridiculous string lights they hang to make things feel romantic, breathing air that finally felt honest. No perfume, no performance, just cold, silent clarity. The drive home was brutal, not because of traffic, but because I kept hearing her words again and again. You can speak if you want. As if I had a line in her grand performance. As if my humiliation was part of the program. I parked 3 blocks away from our house on purpose. I wasn't ready to walk through that door and see her clothes still hanging in the hallway like nothing had changed. I wasn't ready to face the toothbrush she left beside mine or the jacket she always said looked better on her. I paced the sidewalk like some lost soul outside his own life. When I finally went inside, everything looked the same, which somehow made it worse. Her mug on the counter, her shoes by the door, and on the kitchen table a card. Thick, expensive paper. Her handwriting. "Thank you for understanding," it said. Not sorry. Not let's talk. Just thank you, like I'd volunteered for this heartbreak. And that was the moment I realized. She didn't just choose someone else. She had planned this. Every detail. The dinner, the speech, even the part where I disappear quietly. Only she didn't get the ending quite right, because I may have walked out without a word. But this time, she's going to hear every single thing I've held in for years. The next morning felt like waking up in someone else's life. The sunlight slipped through the blinds as if nothing had happened, as if the world hadn't just cracked in half the night before. I sat on the edge of the bed for what felt like hours, staring at the floor where her heels had always landed after a night out. They weren't there, and neither was the echo of her presence. Just that stupid card on the table and the faint smell of her perfume clinging to the hallway like a taunt. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I just felt hollow, like a jar that had been emptied out and set back on the shelf. And then, like a switch flipping, something in me clicked. I was done playing the quiet character in her twisted script. I wouldn't scream, I wouldn't beg, but I would act. My silence the night before had made a statement. Now it was time for the follow-through. I packed a bag, not with clothes but with files. Copies of receipts, joint bank statements, digital backups of every message I'd saved over the years. I wasn't even sure why I had them all, but maybe some part of me had always sensed this ending. I also found something I hadn't thought about in a while. An old flash drive with photos of our early years. Her laughing on that road trip to Oregon. Our first crappy apartment with the broken sink. I nearly tossed it. Then I tucked it back in the drawer. Let her keep the memories. I didn't want them anymore. By 2 p.m., I was at the bank. I froze our joint account before she could get clever. Then I redirected my payroll to an account only I had access to. No dramatic calls. No warning texts. Just silent motions, the kind that leave a bigger impact than any confrontation ever could. Then I went home and took down every photo of us. Every frame. Every smiling lie. I didn't break them. I wrapped them gently, boxed them up, and left them by the door. That evening, her text finally came. Just one line. "Are you coming back tonight?" I didn't answer. Not because I didn't have words, but because the silence was finally mine to control. She didn't expect me to go off script. That's what made it satisfying in the most twisted way possible. Her entire performance at that dinner had been so perfectly timed. The setting, the audience, the rehearsed delivery, all leading to the final blow she thought I'd take like a good little side character. But when I disappeared without protest, I stole the scene. Now, her silence wasn't power anymore. It was desperation disguised as pride. I stayed in a cheap extended stay hotel off the freeway. The walls were paper thin and the bed felt like cardboard. But it gave me something she hadn't in months. Peace. No accusations. No rehearsed lectures. Just the hum of a vending machine down the hall and the weird comfort of my own solitude. I turned off location services. I blocked her number. I stopped checking our shared calendar. She no longer had access to my time, my steps, or my reactions. For once, she didn't know what I was doing, and it made her unravel. The messages started piling up. "I think we should talk." Then, "It didn't mean what you think it did." And later, "You embarrassed me by leaving like that." That one made me laugh. Embarrassed her? As if what she did was some private conversation we needed to have behind closed doors. She dragged me into a public performance and expected applause for her cruelty. But now the crowd had gone quiet, and she didn't know how to fill the silence. She began reaching out to my sister, who wisely didn't answer. Then my mother, who's never liked her, messaged me. Winona called me crying. I didn't pick up. "Proud of you." That hit me harder than I expected. My mom's always been careful not to get involved, but even she saw how long I'd let myself shrink just to keep the illusion of peace. And now that I had stepped away, even briefly, people started telling me things they'd kept to themselves for too long. "She always spoke to you like you were an assistant," one friend admitted. Another said, "We didn't know how to help. You were just so patient all the time." Those comments didn't hurt. They clarified. I hadn't imagined it. I wasn't being dramatic. I was finally seeing the truth without her fog in my eyes. And so was she, except now the silence she once used as a weapon was starting to cut her instead. By the 5th day, her messages turned frantic. Gone was the composed tone, the passive-aggressive phrasing, the rehearsed calm. Instead, she was cracking, line by line. "You're being immature. This isn't how adults handle things." Then, hours later, "I miss you. I didn't think you'd actually leave." That one stayed with me. Not because I missed her, by then, I didn't, but because of the wording. She didn't think I'd actually leave. Like it had all been a test. A bluff she assumed I was too spineless to call. I used to believe that walking away meant giving up. That silence was weakness. But now I realized. Silence only hurts when the other person doesn't expect it. And she didn't. She had always been the one to vanish mid-argument, to weaponize quiet and twist it into control. Now the roles had reversed, and she had no idea how to function without a reaction. She wasn't chasing me because she loved me. She was chasing the certainty she'd lost. And I wasn't going to give it back. I went to our storage unit next, the one we hadn't touched in years. I unlocked the metal door and was hit by the scent of dust and cardboard memories. I went through everything methodically. Old holiday boxes, binders of tax records, And then, a sealed container labeled wedding keepsakes. I opened it, knowing full well what I'd find. Photos, letters, her vows, handwritten in gold ink. I stared at them for a while, trying to summon something. Anger, nostalgia, regret. But there was nothing. Just a weird, sterile calm. I left the box on the floor and walked out without taking anything. She could have it. All of it. That night, I got an email from her personal account with the subject line, "Please, one last conversation." I hovered over it, tempted. But then I saw what followed. A calendar invite. She was scheduling her breakdown. Even her apologies were organized now, polished for control. I didn't open it. I didn't reply. Instead, I sat on that hotel bed, closed my eyes, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel owned. The thing about disappearing is, eventually, someone decides to look for you in person. It happened on a Wednesday. I'd just gotten back to my hotel room after grabbing a greasy sandwich from a nearby gas station, the kind of meal she used to wrinkle her nose at like it was beneath her. I took a bite, dropped my keys on the nightstand, and looked up, only to see her standing outside, through the window of the second-story walkway. I don't even know how she found the place. Maybe my bank visit tipped her off, or maybe she still had some shared GPS data I forgot to revoke. Either way, there she was, not dressed up, no lipstick, no performance, just her. Messy ponytail, red eyes, arms wrapped tightly across her chest like she was cold but didn't bring a jacket. She didn't knock, just stood there, like she expected the weight of her presence alone to shatter the door. I didn't move. I watched her stand in place for nearly 3 minutes before she finally slid something under the door and walked away. Not a letter. Not an apology. A photo, one of us, from our trip to Colorado before her promotion, before everything turned into something curated and cold. On the back, she had scribbled, "This meant something. Please don't forget that." I stared at that photo for a long time. My hand shook. Not from emotion, from restraint. It would have been so easy to fall back into the soft version of myself, the one who always folded first, always saw the best in her even when she wasn't showing it. But I knew better now. That picture didn't represent love. It represented camouflage, the illusion of intimacy built on years of me sacrificing and her selecting. Later that night, I drove to the lake we used to visit. I parked, rolled the window down, and let the breeze hit my face. Then, without drama, I let that photo slip out of my hand and into the water. No fire, no tears, just release. I didn't need to erase her. I just needed to stop keeping proof that she was ever real. It wasn't the texts that got to me. Not the emails, or even the half-hearted voicemail where she pretended to sound composed, but you could hear the panic clawing beneath her voice. No. What got to me was the handwritten letter she left in my mother's mailbox. A place she used to avoid, claiming my mom was passive-aggressive in a Midwestern way. But there it was, her handwriting on lined notebook paper, like we were in high school again. No monogrammed stationery, no scented ink, just raw scribbles in blue ballpoint. The last line hit differently. "Clifton, please talk to me. Just Clifton. No sarcasm, no angles. I just want to talk to you, not at you." The weirdest part? It was the first time in years she'd written my full name. Not Cliff, not Babe, not some clipped nickname meant to mold me into a supporting character in her narrative. Just Clifton. It should have cracked something open in me, but it didn't. Came too late, not just in timing, but in meaning. I was finally starting to feel like my own person again, and I wasn't ready to hand that over, even for a glimpse of sincerity. Instead of replying, I started writing too. Not to her, to myself. Pages and pages, every night, of what I hadn't said aloud for years. Things like, I hated how she corrected my stories in front of friends. I hated how she said I settled into life like it was a flaw. I hated how I laughed off her insults just to keep peace. Writing it down made me realize how long I'd been shrinking myself just to keep her shining. And while I was busy rebuilding whatever was left of me, she was unraveling in silence. Friends texted me screenshots, vague posts she made about regret and healing journeys. One even showed me a photo she uploaded of her hand wearing our wedding ring again. The caption read, "Growth sometimes looks like going backwards." But I wasn't going backwards. I was finally moving forward, away from the noise, the manipulation, the performance. Her regret wasn't a compass. It was a mirror, and I had no intention of staring into it anymore. There was no dramatic confrontation, no final argument, no cinematic moment where I yelled in the rain or slammed the door behind me. That's not how healing looks. It doesn't roar, it exhales. It slips in quietly and settles where pain used to live. And that's exactly how it ended. One quiet Saturday, 2 weeks after she'd stopped reaching out, I went back to the house, not to see her, but to collect the last of what was mine. She wasn't home. I didn't warn her I was coming. I didn't want a scene. I moved quickly, grabbing the rest of my things from the closet, my guitar, some books I'd left behind, and the old coffee grinder I never replaced at the hotel. I found a note taped to the bedroom mirror in her handwriting. "If you change your mind, you know where to find me." I didn't take it down. I didn't even touch it. That wasn't my message to carry anymore. When I left, I didn't feel victorious. I didn't feel angry. I felt light, like I had stepped out of someone else's skin. I drove to the apartment I just signed the lease for. Small, creaky floors, terrible parking. But it was mine. I bought my own dishes. I put up shelves crookedly. I messed up the Wi-Fi setup twice and still felt proud. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't polished. But for the first time in a long time, nothing in my life was staged. A few weeks later, I ran into an old friend. Someone I hadn't seen since before the whole dinner night debacle. She hugged me like she actually meant it, told me I looked different. I said, "Good different." And she smiled and said, "No, real." That's when I knew. Walking away wasn't the end of my story. It was the part where I finally took the pen back. I'm not bitter. I'm not broken. I'm rebuilding, and I'm doing it on my own terms this time. Thanks for watching this full story unfold here on Reddit Confessions. If you've ever faced a moment where someone forced you to choose between their comfort and your self-worth, tell us about it in the comments. What would you have done if you were in my shoes?